The following podcast is created and sponsored by High Beam Ministry.
Why do we need to be gentle?
Because if we get too ungentle, we might get really mean and start doing really mean things to people. We might hurt the person really badly, or if they're not Christian, they might not want to be Christian because they see what they're doing and they'll be thinking that Christian isn't a good religion if that's what they're doing.
You've said, it's all over. I can't be used. And yet, here you are. And the Lord did come to you, and He did speak to you. And He strengthened you. And you got back up off the ground, and you started to walk with Him again. And you started to pray again, and to believe again, and to do good again. What is that but the gentleness of Christ? Tell me what it is if it's not that. You've been there on more than one occasion, and so have I. But here we all are. How gentle He is.
Welcome to the Erzatz Coffee Shop. This is Jay, your Truth Barista, and I'm serving up a steamy cup of God's truth for the average Joe. You can catch me and this podcast on my websites, truthbarista.com, all one word, truthbarista.com, and highbeamministry.com. That's HIGHBEAM ministry.com, as in car high beam. We're shining the light of God's truth on the road ahead. Oh, that was a nice little break there after the morning rush. Man, that was crazy.
It was crazy. Did you see that one customer that came in? I mean, talk about demonstrative.
Are you talking about that that hipster that came in with the funky hat and everything?
Yeah, I mean,
man, what was with him?
I don't know, but he wanted everything plus the kitchen sink. I mean, it was really kind of an embarrassment, really. I was embarrassed for him.
I know. I was kind of sitting in the back area there taking watch over. I'm glad you handled it well. I don't know if I'd be that able to control myself or be too gentle with him because, man, it was just like, he was going nuts.
I know. Well, what about that lady behind him?
Talk about a difference. Man, after having him, he leaves, and then this lady, she's just like, well, whatever. I'll take my latte. That would be great. You know, what a sweetheart she was.
She was very gentle, that's for sure. Well, we're going to talk about gentleness today in our studio.
Yeah, isn't that kind of a neat thing how that comes together? Because, you know, we've been going through the fruit of the Spirit, and it's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness.
Yeah, I don't understand gentleness, and I always have seen gentleness as almost weakness, that somebody's really gentle usually gets taken advantage of because they just aren't demonstrative. They just don't show that aggression and that firmness. They're just nice, gentle people.
I know, the perpetual doormat or the spiritual doormat. Yeah, I used to think that way myself, and then I started doing the study, and one of the best starting places when you do this, amazing Larry, is to get into the actual words themselves, and I have found a treasure trove of information on this. Here, let me grab this out of my Bible here. Okay, this is what I found about this word, okay? It comes from the Greek word prautes. Isn't that great?
I'd like you to say that 10 times.
Prautes. Okay, there we go. It means a mildness of disposition, a gentleness of spirit, and meekness. And meekness is often a synonym for gentleness. But this is what it means. It means mild and gentle friendliness. But as I did some more research on the meaning of this word, I got it from the Discovery Bible and Barclays and other resources here. Gentleness is the meekness which is strength under control. What do you think of that?
I like that. Gentleness is the strength under control.
You see, and that takes out all of that wimpy factor in there.
It does. It does. And, you know, I was thinking about gentleness. Gentleness draws people to you. We all love gentle people, even though we may think they get taken advantage of. There's just something about, it's like a dog that comes up to you and you're wagging his tail and just is so friendly and gentle. You really want to just sit down and pet him and play with him.
But aren't we also attracted to strong people?
Well, we are, but sometimes we fear those strong people people more than we do admiring them.
Now imagine if you had the double draw there. You had somebody who is very, very strong, and yet somebody who is very, very gentle because they keep that strength under control. That person is a very attractive person, because you like to take shelter in their strength. You trust them, and you know that you're never going to be abused by them, like the hipster did this morning, right?
Well, let's get back to that whole idea about gentleness being defined as strength under control, because that is really a great definition.
Right. Here's some others that kind of go along with it. It says that gentleness is a fruit of the Holy Spirit that enables the believer to place the will of God over personal rights. It's also defined as the opposite of a clutching or grabbing spirit. And this kind of gentleness insists only on what's necessary, and it enables a person to always be angry at the right time and never angry at the wrong time. Aren't those great descriptions?
It is, but it doesn't mean that you never be angry. I think that's the key here, right?
Right.
There's a right way to be angry, even as a gentle person.
Yeah, you're right. Now, the best description of the fruit of the Spirit is these are character traits of Jesus. So how does gentleness reflect from Jesus? So all we have to do is go back through some of these descriptions and see how it does. So first of all, did Jesus have a clutching or grabbing spirit? Well, we know that Jesus is God. He started as God. He existed with God and as God according to John chapter 1, right? But it says in Philippians that he did not count equality with his Father something to be grabbed or clutched or held on to. So what he did in Philippians 2 when he came to earth is he emptied himself. He refused to function out of his divine side. He took on a fleshly body, so now he is God in the flesh, and then he functioned as a human being under his Father's will and with his Father's power. But yet he still had a human mind. He still had human power. He still had a human will. He still had human desires.
And emotions.
Exactly. But he submitted all of these things to his Father. So he didn't clutch. He didn't grab. He didn't hold on to this divinity, which he had every right to do. He willingly laid it down so that he could die as a sacrifice for us according to his Father's will.
That emptying yourself is really difficult, but it is a very critical piece. I mean, I think of today how anger rules everything.
Right.
There's such an anger about everything. And why is that? It's because it's all about you.
Exactly.
And all about what you want. But if you empty that out, you wouldn't have that basis for anger.
It's the difference between being selfish and selfless. So Jesus is obviously the example, right? So in connection with that one, Jesus placed the will of his Father before his personal rights. As both God and man, he had inherent rights within him. In fact, even the founding fathers say that we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All right, but there comes a time when we need to be able to willingly lay down our lives, say if we're a soldier. Or liberty. There are certain liberties I don't take because it's not right for me to do so. And the pursuit of happiness, well, my pursuit of happiness is limited under my control because it shouldn't infringe on somebody else's. So I'm self-limiting. Jesus was self-limiting to his Father's will. That's what made him gentle. In fact, Jesus said this, and I keep coming back to them. He's such an example on this. My food, he said, is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. And he says, for I have not come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. That first one was John 4:34, and the second one was John 6:38. So if there's ever a time that tempts us to follow our own will, now remember this, it's when self-preservation kicks in. Jesus had to die according to his Father's will. That was the plan, right? Well, faced with self-preservation, Jesus could have refused to be gentle and exercised his own will. There are times when we have to be gentle and refuse, even in the face of self-preservation, to follow God's will. And self-preservation can be something as simple as, I'm just protecting my reputation, okay? If it has to do with, say, facing bodily harm, well, there's an area of defense there that also kicks in. But how many of us just refuse to be gentle because our reputation is at stake and we want our own way and blah, 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 blah.
I'm surprised you didn't do a Hulk Hogan kind of,
Yeah. Well, I was going to do the Arnold Schwarzenegger.
yeah, the other guy.
Yeah, when I'm offended, I don't have to be gentle anymore. I can come up and pummel the person, right?
Oh, that's good.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's so interesting to this particular passage or passages of Scripture where Jesus talks about doing the will of the Father that's like his food. It's too bad that Adam and Eve didn't have that same attitude, right?
No, they exercise their strength counter to the will of God. And remember, again, the primary definition we're going with today in the Bible study is gentleness is strength under control. They did not control their strength, and therefore they violated their Father's will, and that brought a whole ton of sin into the world. But Jesus did it the opposite. He kept his strength under control, followed his Father's will, and now becomes the source of erasing sin. Isn't that great?
That is great.
Okay, so let's do this Jesus' strength under his control. Now, what you have with Jesus is all the infinite power and authority in the universe brought down into a self-limited, single human body.
Phenomenal cosmic powers!
Now, this is a misconception that we see among a bunch of Christians today. A lot of them think that Jesus was just some kind of meek and mild, wishy-washy, timid, wimpy, pansy weakling with a dead fish handshake.
You know what? I'm happy. Hooray.
Wrong. He is both God and man, divine and human nature in one. He is one with his Father. So as a man, he's carrying all of his Father's unlimited authority and power. That same unlimited power and authority, Larry, that was present before creation, which brought all creation into existence. But Bible illiterate Christians will say, well, Jesus is our good shepherd who loves his little lambs and gently pets them when they're frightened. Yeah, and he can kick the tar out of any wolf that threatens his flock and whacks any sheep that needs correction and discipline. So he has strength, but it's under control. And remember what I said? What's the hallmark of a really attractive person? A person who is very strong, that we can trust because they won't exercise that strength in an abusive or in an undue way. Strength under control.
I just love when you get excited. I mean, that really was
I was getting
very,
ready to preach there.
That was
Did you
very
see the heads turn
passionate.
around when I did that?
Oh, yes. I mean, so we got to keep it a little bit lower.
No, I don't think so. Not
don't
here at the
think so?
Airzats
All
Cafe.
right.
We proclaim loudly.
All right.
Speaking of proclaiming loudly, have you ever read the book The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?
I have. I've actually saw the movie.
Okay, I really liked the movie because it captured the book, but there's one particular line that sticks out of my head regarding this whole gentleness thing, and it's when the kids are talking to the Beaver family, Mr. and Mrs. Beaver,
Yes.
and they talk about Aslan the lion, and of course Aslan the lion is a picture of Jesus, right? And Lucy, who finally finds out that Aslan is a lion, she gets frightened and she says, "Is Aslan safe?" And the beaver replies, "Don't you hear what Mrs. Beaver tells you? Who said anything about safe? Course he isn't safe, but he's good. He's the king, I tell you."
After all, he's not a tame lion.
But he is good.
See, and that is a perfect illustration of strength under control. He's not safe, but he's good. And as a result, he keeps that strength under control. So meekness is not weakness. Gentleness and meekness is strength under control, human strength harnessed to God's will. Does that make sense?
It does. And I know that you're going to talk about this. I'm sure you're going to talk about it anyway. And that is the hardest part of the emotions is to keep emotions in check, because gentleness is strength under control. And the one thing that's volatile, always volatile, is our emotions.
You're right.
You can always get somebody to be angry with you by just saying the wrong thing.
And that's why in the next week's study, we're going to talk about self-control. But in this one, where do our emotions get out of control is when we feel we have a right to something, and yet we are willing to subvert God's will in order to exercise our will to make sure that right is met. If we can get to the point where we're really willing to surrender everything we think we're due, then you've really you've brought a huge element of control on your emotions. And that comes out as tangible gentleness.
Well, I don't know if you knew this or not, but in the University of Arizona, there is a policy now that if somebody offends you by a word, you're supposed to say, ouch! And then the other person who offended you is supposed to say, oops. And it is very ridiculous, but it's the point we're trying to make here is that people can't control their emotions. They get out of control. But our identity is with the gentleness of Christ. That strength under control is what we're trying to get across today.
You know, that really reminds me of something. You see, if God is controlling our life, we won't say those things that require an ouch. Or if we do say those things that require an ouch, what are we going to do? Oh, I'm sorry about that. And then we don't need the other person to go, oops, to remind us, oh, you offended me. Oh, you hurt me. Mature individuals can carry on a decent conversation with all the corrections needed to bring it back in line. But when we start departing from mature living or godly living, we're reduced to nothing but infantile little children where society thinks they have to come in and say, here, oops, ouch, oops, out. Come on. This is a point where mature people need to actually act like adults. And you'd think by the time they get to the university level, they're going to act like grown-ups. But if we've got God controlling our will and our emotions, we won't need that stuff because we will be gentle. We won't allow our emotions to get out of control and exert the strength of our words or the strength of our being. We'll be able to control it and carry on a decent conversation.
And that's why this whole idea of the fruits of the Spirit is the Spirit's character within us. Mm-hmm. And today we're talking about gentleness. It is one of his characteristics. And if we're ruled by that, what you just said is possible.
Exactly. So think of it in these terms as well. When we're talking gentleness, it's strength under control. But where does Satan usually hit us in temptation? He tempts us to exercise our own strength. But if we follow Jesus' example, if we were to do that, we would lose the very thing we're trying to gain. Let me explain this. Jesus is tempted in the area of his strength, which is exercising his will against his Father when he gets the temptation in the desert in Luke chapter 4. Satan says, since you are God's son, exercise your power, turn the stones to bread. Since you are God's son, then promote yourself. Since you are God's son, do this outside of your Father's will, and I'll give you your goal without having to go to the cross. What did Jesus do? The exact opposite of what Adam and Eve did. They exercised their strength and sinned. He kept his in control, followed his Father's will, and died on the cross. And as a result of that, it says in Matthew 28, Jesus came near to his disciples after his resurrection and said, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. By being strength under control, he gained the very thing that Satan was offering him, but he would have lost it in the long run. Oh, sorry, I gotta go. Yeah, phone's ringing. Grab a cup of coffee, Larry. I'll be right back.
Oh, thanks.
Hey, my name's Lindsay, and I come to the coffee shop every day for a good cup of coffee. And on some days when I get here, there's a great Bible study going on with the Truth Barista. It is so good that as I listen to what's being talked about, I even have to order another cup of coffee or two. There are so few places today where you can actually get a good conversation about God and His Word. But you can right here with the Truth Barista. Every week we hear truth being talked about, and it is as rich as their coffee. There are two things I'd like you to do. First, let people know how good the conversations are here with the Truth Barista. And then second, could you help out with a monetary tip to help this kind of communication stay on the internet each week? I talked with the Truth Barista, and we're being heard in the Far East, the Middle East, and all around North America. So this is a solid investment of your charitable dollars. The place where you can donate securely is thetruthbarista.com. Thanks for your help in helping us tell people about the truth in Jesus Christ.
Oh my gosh, this Truth Barista is really great.
Okay. So here we go. Here's a couple other things I listed. Jesus insisted only on what was necessary rather than just grabbing everything that he thought was due him. He just relaxed and he just relied on his Father. He didn't provide for himself. His Father provided for him. In fact, every day, don't you pray the Lord's Prayer? Give us this day our daily bread. Father, that simply means I'm relying on you, Father, to provide for me everything I need. Now, that doesn't mean I don't work. It means, Father, you give me the work, you show me what I need to do. Another definition that we've had earlier is Jesus was always angry at the right time, and he was never angry at the wrong time. He was angry when he just trashed the merchants in the temple who were violating if you want to put it in church terms, they had people who were buying and selling and disrupting the church service. So he gets into the sanctuary of the church and he starts throwing over the tables and beating up the people and driving them out of the church. Okay, that's strength. As God, he probably could have struck them dead, so there's strength under control.
Well, it was firmness under control. I mean, it was standards under control, right?
Yep, exactly.
I mean, and I think it's certainly acceptable to show those standards or that firmness under control. It doesn't go to the point where you're actually doing bodily harm to anyone, I don't think.
No, you're not doing that. But what Jesus was doing is actually doing what was necessary at the time, yet keeping things in check. Now, there were other times on his crucifixion, he was saying, I could call a legion of angels, but he refused to do that. This is real gentleness, being able, as we said again, to, in the face of self-preservation, being able to exercise absolute control.
When you think of the Passion of the Christ, that movie.
Brutal.
Oh, it was terrible, but yet it reminds us of the gentleness of our Savior at that point. Because you're right, he could have, under his authority, stopped all of that in an instant.
Right.
But chose not to.
I'm not making light of it, but when you said that, the first thing that came to my mind was a t-shirt that says crucifixion is not for wimps. Because you look at what he went through and what he endured in order to bring us salvation, it's mind-blowing. I don't know how any human being could have overcome or endured everything he went through.
And the spirit of the world, as we said earlier, is in control of so much. And the spirit of the world is I am first and everyone is second. And that is what rules everything
right.
today.
The spirit of the world is might is right. That's the spirit of the world. No, what God's is strength under control is right. So how does this apply to us? Okay, so let's talk about some of that, because really, I mean, Bible is great, but we're supposed to live it, right? I often tell my people, my congregation and my friends, study to learn to do. That's the point. So Jesus called himself gentle and lowly in spirit. He said, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. That's Matthew 11:29. So take my yoke simply means live my Father's word. In other words, live his will. He says, learn from me, follow his example, and you will find rest. In other words, if we live Jesus' way, according to his Father's will, we will find rest. So, if we don't have a clutching and grabbing spirit, meaning we're willing to lay down what we think we deserve, we will experience rest. Now, how does this manifest? Look at the protests today, Larry. Oh my gosh, those protests around the corner here, everybody screaming for their rights. I don't see any protests, screaming for your responsibilities, right? I just see the right stuff, okay? Because I'm this and such, I deserve this.
Well, that comes back to that spirit that rules. It's me first and everyone is second. You had said something to me in a conversation we had recently about what would happen if in some of these poor areas that Christians would gather together and go in there with as many resources as they have to make sure that everybody in that community, for example, has a job or feels safe. I mean, that would really be a demonstrative thing to do in a good way.
Yeah, we're talking strength under control, so let's look at it this way. I have a voice, I have a body. I can make a demonstration and shut down traffic on a highway and scream at the drivers and be totally obnoxious, and it's a total misspending of my strength. Or I can control that strength, my voice and my body and use it in a constructive way. And as we were talking about, why don't we take an entire community on a map, say the north section of a city, and say, we're going to form a church group that the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hit our knees and pray. And the second thing we're going to do is say, our goal is to make sure that everybody within these boundaries has a job. We will work with every single family in this area to make sure they have the provision that they need. We're not going to give it to them. We're going to help them become productive. Imagine how that would transform the city. And that goes a lot farther than ticking a bunch of drivers off and endangering personal lives.
And so often, when we go back to Martin Luther King and we celebrate, of course, a holiday that's named after him, he was strength under control. He was nonviolent. He wanted to get a message across, but he wasn't going to do it in a demonstrative way that was going to create violence for other people.
Same thing with Gandhi. Gandhi wasn't a Christian, but he knew the principle, and he flipped an entire country because of that. He had strength under control, and his strength came from his ideas, and it came from the people that followed him. They were able to keep that strength under control, flipped an entire nation. What can the church do if you take the people and the ideas, bring them under control, and put them in a positive direction according to the Father's will? I have no doubt you could flip the United States society into a level that we've never seen before as far as good and righteousness goes. So, as far as strength under control or gentleness for a Christian, if we don't have that grabbing, clutching, I deserve this kind of spirit, we'll find rest. If we place God's will before our rights, we'll experience rest. So do we seek God's will over our rights? Well, I have a right to this and such. I have a right to finances. I have a right to a phone and blah, blah, blah. Well, did Father say that you should have a phone? Can you live without a phone? Submit yourself to the Lord and let Him provide for you. If we put our strength under His control, here's another one. We'll experience rest. Do we control the power of our tongues? Do we control the power of our bodies? Do we control the power of our emotions? Do we control all sorts of things? Do we let God control our strengths? That's gentleness, Larry. If we insist on only what's necessary as a start and not exert ourselves crazily pursuing all that we think we need or want, we'll experience rest. That's gentleness. If we use anger properly, we'll experience rest. Now, you were just talking to me about this last week, about the anger issue and how do you handle anger? Okay, so what does the Bible say about handling anger?
We don't allow it to control us, so we give it a time frame, right?
Mm-hmm. What's the time frame?
Well, it's the start of the new day, right? When the sun goes down.
Right. In Jewish thinking, it's when the sun goes down, you start a new day. So in a nutshell, Paul is saying, don't end the day with anger, and don't start the day with anger. Deal with your anger at that moment and then move on. That's how you control the strength of your emotions coming out in anger and show gentleness.
And if you do not control anger or don't deal with anger, as you just said, it turns into resentment and bitterness, and that is really a cancer of the soul.
That is. And it's not gentleness. All right? So are we able to temper our temper? If we can, that's gentleness. And by the way, just, we're getting to the end of our break time here, so we got to get going. But there is a blessing attached to this one as well as faithfulness. It says, blessed are the meek, there's the word, for they will inherit the earth. This actually goes back to Psalm 37. So this is why it's good to do cross-referencing in a Bible study. Psalm 37 is a psalm that encourages God's people to stay cool even when the wicked prosper. And why will the meek inherit everything in the end? I found this in BibleStudyTools.com. Meekness toward God is that disposition of spirit in which we accept His dealings with us as good and therefore without disputing or resisting. In the Old Testament, the meek are those wholly relying on God rather than their own strength to defend them against injustice. So, meekness toward evil people, knowing God is permitting the injuries they inflict, that He is using them to purify His people, and that He will deliver His people in His time. Now, this doesn't mean we don't defend ourselves, okay? That's not what I'm saying. We should. But if we find ourselves in a difficult position at the enemy's mercy, we act like Jesus did when He was at the mercy of those who hated Him. if we endure, we will outlast the wicked in the end. We'll be here on earth because we've done things God's way, and the wicked will not be because they haven't done things God's way. Meekness and gentleness is, in a sense, part of our equipping to make it into eternity.
So, as we leave the Bible study today, we're talking about that idea of gentleness being strength under control. That would be a great way to memorize that, wouldn't it? And just think of the various ways that you're under control, and being under control, you're exhibiting strength.
Every time I want to exercise strength, I have to say, Father, is this in line with your will, how you want me to be? If it's not, control it.
Thanks, Truth Barista. Until next time.
All right. See you later. This is Jay, the Truth Barista, and I want to thank all of you who have taken the time to listen to this podcast. It would be great if you would like us on Facebook and forward this podcast link to your family and friends. We hope to keep bringing you these podcasts every week, but we also need your help in doing so. Think about adding us to your charitable giving, and by doing so, it will help us greatly with the costs of this weekly podcast. Thanks for listening.
The world is in turmoil today, but our lives can have peace. If we accent on the turmoil, we will feel its effect. But if we accent on the peace of God in Jesus Christ, we will experience His peace. Turmoil or peace, it's your choice. Thanks for joining us.
This is Jay, your Truth Barista. Thanks for listening to the Truth Barista podcast. The best way to find out when a new podcast drops is through RSS feed. Go to our website, look for the RSS button, press it, and then enter your email. You'll be notified when a new podcast drops. Thanks for listening.